Good afternoon and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge on key business topics and specialist areas. Our host today is BizSmart Select member Lorna Brooks of Lorna Brooks Management Development, and here to talk to us about performance management issues affecting your team. Before we start our webinar, can I ask you all to use the question mark function on your screen to post any questions that you may have for Lorna, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the session. Okay, Lorna, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Caroline. Just to remind you, as Caroline says, my name is Lorna Brooks and my business is Lorna Brooks Management Development. And I work with managers to help them stay strong and calm, whatever the challenge they face in the workplace. Just as an introduction, this is me delivering a couple of talks last year so you can see what I look like. And today we're going to talk about performance management. Some of you might already be saying, what on earth does Lorna mean this time? It really is about managing the performance of your team. So how well are they doing? Are they delivering the objectives, the goals that you need them to deliver? Are they clear in what they're doing? Are they doing it well? And if they're not, it's up to you as a manager to try and give them guidance and support so that they can do it better. And that's where we go to can't do versus won't do. If your staff are underperforming, it can well be that they just can't do the work, or it can well be that they won't do the work. And you as a manager have to unpeel those layers like an onion to find out what's going on to see how you can sort that out. So what we're going to look at today, three basic things. First of all, the tools you need to deliver effectively on performance management. And these tools you'll recognise when we go through them, and we'll have a chat about why they're really important. We'll then look at what can't do and what won't do means, and why there is a difference. And then we'll have a look at how to manage both of these, and they're dealt with in totally different ways. So I'm not one normally for using quotes, but this one comes up a lot, and I'm sure you recognise Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind. And that's really important when it comes to performance management. You should be thinking about how you want your staff to behave, how you want them to do the job before you even go to interview, before you speak to them, before you even advertise. What do I want these staff to do, and how do I want them to behave for me? Now, you probably had all this when you worked in corporate. You probably had a lot of policies and procedures, etc. in place. And you're probably looking at the list that I've just put before you, thinking, Lorna, I've been there, I've seen it, I've done it, and I've hated it. That's why I left corporate. That's why I came to work for myself. There's 2 points here. First of all, this is all about you and your business. You're in control of how you develop the list of the basics that you need. So you can write them in any which way you want. Yes, they've got to be foolproof. And yes, there's loads of help out there. And if you're not sure where to get help, come and speak to us at BizSmart, because we have some great HR support that can help you write these things. But ultimately, you can make them do the work for you in the way you want them to. What you need to remember is they're there for a reason. They've developed in corporate because they have had staff who can't do or won't do what they've needed them to do in the workplace. But the difference here is in corporate, you might have 100, 200, 1,000 employees. So all the basics become very, very generic. If you've only got 2 or 3 staff, you don't need them to be generic. You can need them to be specific, and you can need them to be workable. I'm working with a client at the moment, and they do annual appraisals. So once a year, they sit down with all their staff, and they look at the goals for the following year. They look at how they've achieved last year, and they put together a plan for the future. That system is 26 pages long. 26 pages long. Can you imagine? That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is workable solutions for you. So let's briefly go through the list. First of all, getting the basics right. Have you got the job description to hand? Do you know exactly what you want that person to do? And that's all a job description is. It's a list of things. I want you to do A, B, C, D, and E. And a job description isn't something that you bring out for interview, file and never look at it again. It's an active document. Especially in small business, things change quite a lot. You might lose a couple of clients, you might pick up a couple of clients. That might take you in a totally different direction for the way you're going. And if you haven't looked at that job description on a regular basis, they might be doing something totally different to what your needs are. So just literally a list of what's going on and what you need them to do. Have you got a contract? Contract's really important to put the basics in there. A good example is, what do you want their working hours to be? If you want a member of staff to work 9 to 5 and you never actually told them and it's not in their contract and they keep turning up at 9:15 and it's really winding you up, what have you got in writing to say to them, excuse me, that's 15 minutes every day, that's over an hour a week of my money you're wasting. That's why contracts are important. Then you need the policies in place that if something does go wrong, you can deal with them, you can refer to them. A discipline policy and a capability policy that you can't do and you won't do. And we'll go through those in some detail later. But again, they don't have to be onerous, they just have to be workable. Objectives. Have you got the objectives in place? Have you got the goals in place for this person? So you know what they want to do from their job, but over the next year, what specifically do you want them to do? And are you meeting with them regularly to make sure that they're on target, that they're doing what you ask of them, and not just doing the bits they like, for instance, and ignoring the bits they don't? So making sure you've got the basics in place before you start are essential. And like I say, that's not really my speciality. It's human resources specialisation to get that written down for you. And here at BizSmart, we can help you with that as well. So moving on now, we're going to look at this can't do and won't do. And the first one that I quite often throw about is capability. And people say, what do you mean by capability? I don't quite get that, Lorna. And what it is a person just can't do their job. And 9 times out of 10, they can't do it because they don't have the skills and the knowledge. So really it starts with a good induction, good training, good delivery, really understanding their objectives and really supporting them as they go along. So if you've got those basics in place, you should be able to see whether it's they can't do it because they haven't got the skills, they can't do it, they haven't got the knowledge, or whether they're just not right for the job, which might well happen. And I've interviewed people who've told me all sorts in interview, then when it comes down to it, they don't have the skills to do it. I'm going to give you an example. I actually worked with someone a couple of years ago who'd been in the job for 10 years. And for 10 years, she'd lost that company custom time and time and time again. But the managers had never done anything about it because they didn't quite get what's going on. And by working with her on her capability to do the job, we were able to make a real difference. And she's still now there 2 years later and hasn't lost a contract since. So if a person isn't capable of doing their job, there's a lot of things you can do to support them, to give them the skills that they need. And quite often, if you can't work out whether it's that they can't do it or they won't do it, capability is a really good place to start. That assumption that maybe they can't do it because they don't have the skills and the training. And were I to give them those skills and training, that might be the place where they develop from. So what you're looking at doing is what we call in the bigger corporate world a performance development plan, PDP. You call it whatever you like, an action plan, progression plan, or just a plan, or even a list of things we need to have a look at. The most obvious one everyone thinks about is training, and training's fabulous, we know it works. But sometimes when you've got down to the specifics of what a person needs, training might not be the ideal thing. And I'll give you the example I used a minute ago. The person that I was working with in Birmingham 2 years ago, her issue was time management. She really was so poor at time management that she was losing work for them. Now, I'm not a time management specialist. I do a lot of work on it, but not to any level. So I called in another BizSmart member, a time doctor, Mike Gardner, and he actually did some work with her on my behalf. And just by doing some one-on-one training with her and one-on-one support, he managed to completely overturn the way that she managed her time. So that one-on-one training was superb. That's what she needed. And she said to me then, I've been on so many time management courses, but they're always so generic. They didn't make sense to me because the work I do is really specific and a lot of it is reactive. And the whole point of time management tends to be planning. So there's training, always a good place to start. A few other things, shadowing. How about if you know someone who does a similar job, that you get your member of staff to follow them in their role so they can really see what's going on, pick up some hints and tips on how they can develop it. And if it's only a small business and you've got no one else in your role, in your business, think outside to your network. When you're out networking, what similar organisations are out there? What good business networks have you got and good business pals who can take somebody that you work with under their wing for a day or two just to show them how they can do this differently. And a good example might be sales. If you've got someone who does a small part of sales in their job, but they're new to sales, who do you know in other industries that you won't clash with and they could shadow someone who's good at sales for a couple of days? Mentoring is when you actually get some one-on-one support for someone who's going to advise them on how best to do their job. And that really is someone who's been doing it for a while and can give excellent advice. Coaching is really drawing out the answers from the individual. So you have to ask whether coaching was the right thing if you felt they actually needed more advice than to know the answers to themselves. And when I work with a lot of clients, I actually toggle between the two. So get as far as we can with them through coaching, empowering them to make the decisions, and then throw in a bit of mentoring just to ensure that we embed what we're doing into their practice. And while you've got all this in place, you need to meet with them more often, more frequent one-to-ones, just to make sure they're on the right path. Be more specific with your instructions to really understand what they want, and record. Write everything down. Make sure you've got it written down. Because at the end of the day, it might well be that you put all this in place and it doesn't change anything at all. Excuse me. Now, in my lifetime, I've been managing for 20 years. And of all the capability processes I've supported people through, I'd say it's about a 50-50 split between people who stayed in the organisation and improved and done really well, and people who have decided to move on, or decided the job isn't for them, or the organisation has decided the job doesn't suit them and they've had to move on. So it can work, it can be really successful. And the one thing I've noticed makes a difference is if you've got buy-in from the member of staff. What I find most of all when it first starts is that your member of staff can get really defensive. A lot of the time they just assume you're trying to get rid of them, not that actually you want to keep them. If you think how much time and money it costs to recruit someone, it's actually cheaper to put this in place and keep them than it ever would be to replace. The person I spoke about in Birmingham, she really was defensive to start with. It was very difficult. She was decided that I really wanted to get rid of her. After 10 years, no one before had told her she wasn't doing the job properly. So obviously it was me at fault rather than herself, and I totally understood where she was coming from. And the thing that made the difference, I must put my hands up and say it wasn't me, it was her critical friend. Because in their policy, she was allowed to bring someone into the capability interview. And we sat and we talked, and it was a person she brought in who could see through her defensiveness to understand what I was trying to do. And he supported her, and because she trusted him so much, she started to believe that yes, we were going to help. And with my help, and as I say, with the help of the Time Doctor, she's now doing a cracking job. So that's capability really. It's about, is the person capable of doing the job? And it might well be that there comes a point where you actually think you've thrown everything you can at them, they've had that PDP forever, they don't seem to be making anything, and you have to move them on. Well, there could be another side to the story, where there's a case of actually they just don't want to do the job. They really can't be bothered to put that effort in. Now take it back to basics. At the end of the day, that if you've got that contract in place, what a contract says is, I agree to do the job as per my job description in exchange you will give me money. So if a person is accepting the money from you, then they ultimately agree with the contract. So if you've got everything written down in the contract and you've got everything written down in the job description and they're not doing it because they don't want to, then you've got an opportunity to look at the possible discipline. And the discipline starts very, very low with the possibly poor timekeeping, turning up late for meetings, or actually they just can't be bothered, right the way through to the possible things going missing in the office, pens, papers, stationery, right the way through to bigger issues. Now, some bigger issues, such as, if you fear that there is a theft, then you might have to be thinking about gross misconduct. But normally you'll find in a discipline policy there's most of different layers in between, such as, preparing for an event, if they're an event manager, and they haven't taken time to make sure they've got everything with them. So there you are running around at the event trying to find different solutions to problems that wouldn't be there if they'd have actually managed the event properly. So if you feel that the person isn't doing the job because they just don't want to do the job, sometimes by disciplining them, it's a quick enough jolt to make them realise that they could lose their job if they don't make a difference. So really, it's a case of taking action. Investigate everything thoroughly. So if it's the matter that they're turning up 15 minutes late, have that conversation. Why is that happening? It could be something really understandable, such as traffic jam, change of the school hours, or change of route. It could be something that you could do really differently. Or if it's an attitude or a behaviour problem, then discipline could be the case. Be mindful of the time it takes to do the discipline case. One of the people I supported a few years ago had lost a major contract because they'd sent people along to deliver the contract who weren't skilled and weren't trained to actually deliver. It was a £30,000 contract. When I first started talking to that person, they'd not been suspended, they were still working every day. And for 6 months, they'd been doing their job, waiting to find out what was going to happen with his discipline case. For 6 months, they'd been on edge. And I spoke to their manager and I said, I think to be fair, you've just got to say that you can't do anything of a particularly stringent nature because you've allowed this person to carry on to do their job. If it was really important to you, that £30,000 contract, so important that you don't trust this person to do the job, that's when you have to suspend them from work. And that's when you need to bring in your HR advisor. But if you keep them working, then you're showing faith in them to do their job. And 6 months later, it's just too late to do anything too stringent with your discipline policy. And be mindful of the fact that every day that they're waiting for some sort of result, they're probably quite stressed out with it all. And it's time to draw a line under it and move on. Make sure you carry out the procedure to the letter. The last thing you want is to find that someone has actually done something worse than you thought. You've uncovered some heinous issues going on in the workplace. But because you haven't followed procedure, you're the one that's going to have the trouble. Make sure you feedback fairly. Be firm but fair, so the person understands the feedback and it's clear what's going on. And again, record, write everything down because you never know where it's going. So hopefully you can see the difference now between they can't do something, their capability needs, they won't do something. So there is a discipline need. Now you might say to me, Lorna, that's great, but I'm busy. I've got so much to do. It all sounds a bit complicated to me. Well, I would say that doing nothing is not an option. And this is why. First of all, you will be seen as a weak manager. And I think it's important you're seen as a strong manager and a leader, especially when it's your own business. You set the standards. So if those standards aren't particularly strong, it won't just be this one person that's playing you up. Other people will follow. If that one person's turning up 10, 15 minutes late every day and you've not spoken to them and sorted it, then why should everybody else come in on time? The situation, as it says, could carry on or could escalate. If you notice there's a few pens going missing, what's going to go missing next? If people realise that actually they can help themselves from work and nothing will happen. And actually you could say, well, Lorna, a lot of it's corporate, but actually this is personal. It's your money that they are wasting by not doing the job you're asking them to do. It's your time they're wasting too. What impact is it having on the other staff? What impact is it having on their behaviour if they know that someone else is getting away with it? What impact is it having on the individual? They could be quite stressed underneath, you never know. Or they could just be taking the mick. And what impact is it having on you? Are you getting wound up with it all? Are you getting angry with it all? It is your business that you've been working hard to do after all. So remember, when you're thinking about how you're managing performance within your team, these are my 3 biggest tips. First of all, ensure you have the basic tools to hand. Professionally written and supported HR advice is really, really useful to ensure that it's all ready to go. Because if the wheel does come off, you can use those tools. First of all, I would suggest you have a look at a person who possibly can't do what they're doing. Sometimes it's obvious they won't do it, but quite often it's can't do. So think about, right, how am I going to put that PDP into place? And won't do. And what if they won't do what they do? Be strong. How to manage both is to take action. Now, my speciality is to work with managers to give them the confidence to take that action, because I understand standing in front of someone and telling them they are not good enough at their job is really difficult. But trust me, by having the confidence to do that, the benefits will come tenfold in 6 months' time when that person is working perfectly, or you've moved them on and you've brought in someone who is. So, I'm Lorna Brooks. My business is Lorna Brooks Management Development. And thank you for listening today. We've got a few questions to answer, but in the meantime, if any of you like to get hold of my ebook, Managing Your Team, with basic hints and tips, please help yourself from my website, lornabrooks.co.uk. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We've got some questions coming through. If I have a member of the team who is late all the time, they work hard so it doesn't bother me, but the other staff complain sometimes. What should I do about it?
Well, that's a really good one. Thank you for that one. As I mentioned, people turning up late quite a few times. I'm quite laid back when it comes to management. And if someone is turning up a bit late and they've got a good excuse, I'm not normally that bothered. But I do keep an eye on the rest of the team, because if they've made the effort to get back there on time, it's not a surprise that they might get a little bit angry with what's going on. So if it's a long-term issue, I'd suggest that you have a word with a person and just explain to them why it's important for them to turn up and the impact they're having on the rest of the team, because you don't want to wind the rest of the team up. You need to work together in a group. So I'd say speak to them, but do it very gently, because sometimes that's all you need to do. And then hopefully they will start coming in on time. If it's a problem, you can always change the contract, get them to start working at 9:30 instead of 9 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Liz, and she asks, I suspect that someone is stealing from me. What do I do? Do I have to involve the police?
Well, this is a big one, Liz. And the first answer I'd say is no, you never have to involve the police. That's your choice. It's always your choice to report an offence. And as an ex-copper, I can confirm that one. Whether you suspect someone or not, it really is a case of evidence and fact. And that's quite often the difficult case. I have a friend who found one of her staff with their hands in the till. And until she actually saw that, she knew there was money going missing, but had always assumed it was her husband, because it was husband and wife. It was always the husband who was helping himself to a sandwich at lunchtime and so forth. And it was a complete shock when it actually found out that it was a member of staff. So what you need to do, if you've got those suspicions, is to start looking for evidence and keep a log, a written log. Because if you've got that written log, you can start building up the evidence to get a better picture of what's going on. And that's when you feel ready that you've got enough evidence to speak to the member of staff under the discipline code, your discipline procedure, then you can take it forward. But just be mindful of the fact that you really need to have that evidence in place, because what you don't want to do is be accused of false or malicious. And the police are normally pretty good if you just want to have a chat with them off the record. I'm sure, especially nowadays, there's quite a lot of local bobbies that will have a chat with you about it if you need to know more.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Simon. I don't have the time for regular catch-ups with my staff. That's why I brought them in to help with the workload. Are they really that important?
Thank you, Simon. And I often get this with people I'm working with. And what I'd say is the catch-ups that you have with your staff are probably the most important way of managing them on a day-to-day basis. Like I said all along, it's your money, it's your time, and you want to make sure that they're using that money and time effectively. So if you can find an hour a month, that's all we're talking about here, an hour a month, to sit them down and work through their goals to make sure that they're on target, then that will make a huge difference to what you do. Now, we quite often find in a small team that you're talking to each other all the time. So you think, well, actually, I've already done all that bit. But how often do you actually make notes? How often do you write down the conversations you have in the office? You don't. So you're losing all that wonderful evidence that you might need 6 months down the line if you're looking at capability or discipline. So what I would suggest you do is you actually schedule these in up front, maybe even January for the whole of the year. Doesn't mean you can't tweak them if something else comes up, but at least you'll remember when February comes, when March comes, yes, I'm meeting that member of my team on this day, let's get that sorted. And you'll notice from my ebook that I actually do recommend, if you've got time, is to take them off site. Somewhere like here where we are at the moment, beautiful site with a little cafe just over the way. Go over there, have a quick cup of tea, you're away from the working environment, and quite often your staff will open up a little bit more to you and you get to peel another layer of that onion. Thank you, Simon.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Lorna, for hosting today's webinar. I will send out a copy of today's presentation and Lorna's full contact details out to you all later on today. But thank you again for joining us, and Laura and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Cheers, bye.